Let's bring out the man I have a massive man crush on. Maybe it's more than a man crush. I don't know. Liam O'Brien is Vax'ildan!
Hey there guys, Mike for CMCC Builds here with another episode of Optimizing Critical Role. Here we aim to take the character concepts of the Critical Role cast and build them as effectively as possible from an optimizer's perspective without losing the essence of the character. And to make things even more interesting, I'm doing all this with the 2024 rule set. That means any updated content will have to be from the 2024 PHB. And any official material that has not been updated can and will be used as is in its current state. Before we dive in, I want to ask everyone who hasn't done so already to go ahead and bludgeon that subscribe button. Getting to 10K subscribers before Christmas would be a nice little gift. Still, only 34% of my watch time is from subscribers, so the vast majority of you watching this right now have yet to smash that button. We got a lot more coming from this series, the Gauntlet series, 5-minute builds, and others. You don't want to miss it. Now that you're subscribed, wink wink, let's tackle everyone's favorite brooding, emo, knife-tossing stealth assassin, Vax'ildan, and go ahead and dive into today's episode of Optimizing Critical Role. We're going to start off a little different on this one than the Percy video. We stuck to the PHB order for Percy, but here I want to start off immediately with species rather than class. Why the change? I want to tackle a major question mark right off the bat. There are no half-elves in Dungeons & Dragons 2024, and as we all know, Vax and Vex are half-elves. That gives us 3 options for Vax's species, and my plan is to use each of these options for each half-elf in the first campaign. 1, we can revert to the 2014 races via backwards compatibility, and just pick the old half-elf. 2, per Jeremy Crawford, we can pick an elf, flavor it as a half-elf, and keep all the elf mechanics. Or 3, and the one we're going to take here, go with human, flavor it as half-elf. If that bothers you for some reason, feel free to take one of the other 2 options for your own version of this build. Any of them will work just fine. Human provides a heroic inspiration through the resourceful feature, another proficiency through skillful, and here we want to take perception. Vax quite often snuck ahead, splitting from the party to do a sneak assassin thing, so in that case, we want to be sure to have proficiency in perception. For languages, I took Elvish for obvious reasons, and Draconic, which Vax may have learned from his sister. Abyssal isn't available. None of the other languages make a ton of sense to me, given Vax's backstory and the course of the campaign. The main draw of humans, though, is the versatile feature that provides an extra origin feat, and here we want to take Lucky. Not nearly as good as the Lucky that Liam used throughout campaign 1 to great effect, but still very strong origin feat. Luck points scale with proficiency and provide advantage or disadvantage on the roll, as opposed to re-rolls. The latter change is quite the nerf, but again, the feat is still strong, just not annoyingly powerful. Working our way backwards, we'll select a background. Nothing fancy here. Criminal provides ASI for Dex, Con, and or Intelligence, along with proficiencies in Stealth and Sleight of Hand, 2 skills we absolutely need for this build. For the tool proficiency, I grabbed a Forgery Kit, which can aid in subterfuge and other deceptive activities. For the Origin feat, Criminal gives you the Alert feat, one of the 2 strongest available along with Musician. This build will end up with an insanely high initiative score, too high to be honest, so there's almost no way this build will lose initiative to anyone at any point by tier 4. And adding proficiency to your initiative score is step 1 in that direction. This build will want to go first, especially on round 1, so getting that initiative bump ASAP is indeed important. With the ASI, we'll take a 1-point bump in Constitution and a +2 in Dexterity. Hopping over to the abilities, it appears Liam rolled a 9, 12, 2 14s, 15, and 18. Pretty good. Obviously, his half-elf selection makes it impossible for me to know exactly what he rolled, but this is my best guess. Immediately changing things up from Liam's choices, we're going to dump Strength. 14 Strength and a 10 Constitution is simply unacceptable on this build, or really any build. We're going to put the 15 in Dexterity instead of the 18. That 15 bumps to 17 with the background ASI. Yes, Dexterity will be the most important stat, but with all the general feats and epic boons being half feats, we can afford to use a lower stat here. In fact, if we don't go this route, many of those half feat ASI bumps will be wasted. Constitution gets the 14, bumping to 15 with the background ASI. The 12 goes into Intelligence, the 18 in Wisdom. Perception, Survival, Insight, and others all rely on Wisdom, as will other aspects of this build. This should tip you off to one of the major changes of my version of Vax. And finally, we'll use the 14 on Charisma. Although Liam's Vax also had a 14 Charisma, we didn't use any ASI to get there, which means for the first time ever in optimizing Critical Role history, we've changed every single stat from the original choices. Pretty interesting. Now, we've made it to the beginning, the starting class. Vax was and will continue to be a thrown weapon build. Mercer was real flexible on the rules and magic items to facilitate that fantasy for Liam. He was the birthday boy after all, so I can totally forgive that. But things like 2014 Sharpshooter do not work with thrown weapons, like at all, excluding the dart, the only thrown and ranged weapon. Literally every clause of Sharpshooter doesn't apply to thrown daggers. And the returning belt to allow Liam to recover those daggers obviously helps immensely, and so on. In 2024, this is no longer the case. You absolutely can make a viable throne build, and there is a strong argument to start off with a level fighter to do so, but I'm going to forego that to run headfirst into Rogue primarily for the added skills and dexterity saving throw proficiency rather than Constitution, not because it's better than Con, but because I want as many saving throw proficiencies as possible, and we don't want any more dexterity bumps that would come with something like Resilient Dex. And with those skills, we're going to grab many of the same ones as Liam. Acrobatics, Investigation, Intimidation, and Persuasion are all decent choices. With the 3 this build already has, we'll double up the bonus with Expertise on Sleight of Hand and Stealth. Thieves' Cant provides the Thieves' Cant language, and another language of choice. Abyssal was one of Liam's picks, so we'll replicate that here. Sneak Attack comes online right at level 1, so be sure to know how to proc it appropriately. Advantage, or an ally within 5 feet, and no disadvantage is the shorthand. And finally, at this level, weapon masteries. The only important one is the dagger. Vax uses a dagger. Well, daggers. All the time. That's his thrown weapon of choice, and the dagger has the Nick property, which allows you to make the extra attack of the light property as part of the attack action instead of a bonus action. That's great for a rogue that has a lot of bonus action options. This build will have a lot of masteries, but honestly, the rest are just icing. Choose whatever you think works, but here, the short sword makes sense as a finesse option with the Vex mastery for advantage on attacks after you land an attack. Here, we're going to jump over to Fighter to get a fighting style. Thrown weapon fighting is the new option in 2024 that wasn't around in 2014 when Liam built Vax. This provides a +2 to damage on a ranged attack with a thrown weapon. This means the more attacks Vax gets, the better. So we're going to want to lean into that. Fighters also get second wind for some healing, and 3, the Rapier with Vex, not Vax. Scimitar with Nick, and Dart with Vex are all fine options. The Dart allows you to use Sharpshooter if you want to go that route for some reason. We will not. Back into Rogue at level 2, Cunning Action for the Dash, Disengage, and Hide options as bonus actions instead of actions. And at Rogue 3, the subclass. We've seen how strong the Thief is. If you haven't, check out that build. Arcane Trickster can actually be fantastic if built correctly. Soul Knife is interesting, but too far off the original character concept for me to choose, so we're gonna stick with the Assassin. I see no good reason to change it, despite the subclass not being a particularly strong one. The Assassinate feature gives advantage on initiative rolls. That combos with Alert to make this build a beast already at level 4 with Initiative. A high dex build that gets a proficiency bonus to Initiative and advantage is gonna be difficult to beat on that Initiative roll. And to make it even better, Surprising Strikes gives advantage against any creature that hasn't taken a turn. And if the Assassin hits with Sneak Attack, they deal extra damage equal to the Rogue's level. This means we're going to want to take a significant amount of Rogue levels to make this feature worthwhile. Assassin's Tools gives a Disguise and Poisoner's Kit and proficiency in both. Vax did have a Dagger of Venom, so making and using poisons would be a nice workaround in the event your DM doesn't hand out magic items like Mercer. Rogues also get Steady Aim, which trades movement for advantage. Rogue 4, character level 5, the first feat, and here, take Dual Wielder. Liam did select this same feat in his original build, but the 2024 version is much different. Now when we take the attack action on our turn with a weapon that has the light property, like a dagger, we can make one extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn with a different weapon, which must be a melee weapon that lacks the two-handed property, like a dagger, but we don't get to add the dex mod to the extra attack's damage. So, with the Nick property, you can make a second attack as part of the attack action. With the Dual Wielder feat, you can make a third attack as part of the bonus action. That essentially ensures Sneak Attack lands every round, and each attack will have a +2 damage from the thrown weapon fighting style, and advantage in round 1, assuming Vax wins initiative, which he likely will, and eventually always will. And that Sneak Attack will land with a plus Rogue level damage. Now that's an extra +4 right now, but that gets much higher. Dual Wielder also has a quick draw feature that allows you to draw or stow 2 weapons instead of just 1. I don't think Matt ever tracked action economy at any point in any game, so not an issue for Liam, but perhaps your DM is a bit more of a stickler. And this also rounds dex off to 18 with the feat. Level 5 Rogue for Cunning Strike, which provides some interesting options for sneak attacks, and Uncanny Dodge provides a decent defensive boost. Rogue 6 Expertise, and here take Perception and Acrobatics. I don't love Acrobatics as a skill for Expertise, but it's too spot on for the Vax character to switch, and none of the remaining available skills are good enough to pull me in that direction. Rogue 7 Evasion for more defense, reliable talent to make any proficient ability check a 10 as a minimum. Rogue 8 for another feat, and here take Defensive Duelist. That bumps Dex to 19, where it will unfortunately sit for a while. And that's okay. With all the advantage options this build has, a +4 mod isn't the end of the world. This feat allows you to use a reaction to add proficiency bonus to your armor class, so +2 to +6, against a melee attack and all other melee attacks until the start of your next turn. This is the Marshal's answer to the shield spell, and it can be used every turn you have a reaction. Rogue 9 Infiltration Expert provides masterful mimicry to mimic another person's speech and or handwriting. Not really a great ability, but certainly can be valuable at a high RP table like Critical Role. And Roving Aim allows you to use steady aim without reducing your speed. That's fine, but that bonus action will often be eaten up by an extra attack. Level 10 provides the Rogue's bonus feat. Here we're going to take Resilient Con. Again, the same as Liam did, but here this rounds off Constitution at 16 rather than the odd 11. This makes Vax much sturdier than the Liam version. If you're going to have a character pushing ahead of the party, scouting, investigating, getting close to melee with thrown weapons, you simply need to have some durability that the original Vax just didn't have. We're going to achieve that through a high con score, improved hit points, and more saving throw proficiencies. And now we're going to add a few Skullvilles to this build, really spice things up. I know many of you aren't going to like it, but we are not going Paladin. I know, Vax was the champion of the Raven Queen, so Paladin, right? But there's no explicit reason a champion needs to be a Paladin. Yeah, Vax and Ford did it, but not all Critical Role champions were Paladins. And from a mechanic standpoint, Paladins and Rogues don't mix. They can mix, just not well. And they mix terribly with a ranged or thrown weapon build, because none of the smite spells can be used from range, unlike the playtest. This build, being the latter, means we need to rethink how to build based on the massive character change at level 14 when Vax accepts his role to dedicate his life to the Matron of Death. Right now, Vax is character level 11. We need to time this perfectly with a subclass selection at 14, and we will, because a much better multiclass for rogues, and one that makes sense for Vax given his sister is a ranger, is for Vax to immediately multiclass into ranger. Trust me, this subclass makes more sense for a follower of the Raven Queen than a Vengeance Paladin. And with Ranger, we can even mimic many of the Paladin spells and features that Vax used to heal and buff allies. It would make sense that Vax picked up Ranger skills from Vex, similar to how she picked up Rogue skills, and Vax can even use those Ranger skills to impress Keyleth rather than taking the final level of Druid. The Ranger gets a skill proficiency, and Insight is a strong option for a high wisdom character. Favored enemy works differently than the 2014 equivalent. Now they get the Hunter's Mark spell auto-prepared and a free casting once per day, and this is the first parallel ability we get, as Vengeance Paladins also get the Hunter's Mark spell, and Liam cast it 7 times in campaign. This bonus action usage does conflict with extra attacks and cunning action uses, so find the right time, like a single huge target that won't require multiple reapplications of the spell. With the 2 new weapon masteries, I took the whip for the slow property and the hand crossbow for a ranged Vex option. I can totally see Vax using a whip, and the hand crossbow will simply be a long distance option when getting close isn't viable. Deft Explorer provides 2 languages. I'll take Celestial due to Vax's eventual connection to the Raven Queen, and Gnomish because there were 2 gnomes in the party and I'm not really sure what else makes sense. More importantly, we can get Expertise and Insight already, which is a nice bump there. And at Ranger 2, we get another fighting style, and we'll take the 2 weapon fighting. We make the extra attack as a result of using a weapon that has a light property. You can add your ability modifier to the damage. Through the Nick property and the dual laser feat, we will have 2 extra attacks from the light property. Now both will have a nice +4 to +5 mod attached to it. Okay, now the subclass choice, level 14, when Vax decides to give in to the Raven Queen's demands of him to find his true purpose not in Serenade, but in the shadow of the Matron of Ravens. So this selection should probably be obvious. It's the best combination with Rogue. It makes perfect sense for a follower of the Matron of Death, the Dusk Maven, the Goddess of Death and Twilight. We're of course going with the Gloomstalker. It makes so much more sense for me for his dark aspects to be amplified by his following of the Raven Queen rather than the shiny Paladin features that buff and heal. But we can do that too, just with better flavor and more appropriate mechanics. Dread Ambusher provides a +10 movement speed increase in round 1. which helps to make sure we get in range for all of our big attacks in the first round. The initiative bonus allows us to add our wisdom mod to initiative. It's at this point that Vax will basically never lose another initiative. Advantage from assassin, proficiency bonus from alert, and wisdom mod from dread ambusher, all on a dex-based character. And the final clause of this feature, not all the level 3 Gloomstalker features, just this one, is Dreadful Strike, which gives an extra 2d6 psychic damage once per turn, a number of times equal to Wisdom mod. This is Vax's mini Divine Smite. It deals psychic damage, which I like better for a champion of the Raven Queen than Radiant, although either is fine. It can be used from range, unlike any of the Smite spells, and being usable is kind of important on any build, and we'll get 4 to 5 uses regardless of spellcasting, so it's more usable than Divine Smite. And considering Liam used Divine Smite 22 times during Campaign 1, he certainly would have gotten plenty of use out of this one. Oh, and we're not done. Umbral Sight is perhaps an even better fit for the goddess Twilight. You gain dark vision out to 60 feet. As mechanically human, despite being narratively a half-elf, Vax did not actually have dark vision until right now. Magically getting dark vision the moment you decide to champion the goddess of death in Twilight is fantastically cinematic. Imagine Vax sulking in the darkness, a lost soul, then accepting the Raven Queen, and boom, finally I can see. And to top it off, while in darkness, Gloomstalkers have the invisible condition to any creature that relies on dark vision to see them. The Radiant Paladin or the invisible Night Killer Gloomstalker. I mean, come on. Level 15, we're going to max out Wisdom to get another Dreadful Strike and all the other Wisdom benefits. We're not going to take many ranger spells that rely on Wisdom, but you certainly could be highly effective going that route if you want. Level 16, Ranger 5 gives extra attack, bringing the total attacks to 4 per round. Ranger 6 gives a flat 10-foot bonus speed without heavy armor, while adding a climb and swim speed. And finally, at Ranger 7, Iron Mind gives Wisdom saving throw proficiency, which means this build concludes with proficiency in Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom saving throws, the big 3, along with Intelligence. Before we leave Ranger, let's discuss spells. Absorb Elements is a must-grab, especially in a campaign dominated in large part by a consortium of ancient dragons. We need to keep Vax alive. Cure Wounds does an excellent job of replicating the Paladin's Lay on Hands feature that Liam used 25 times. It's buffed from the 2014 version and does 2d8 plus 5 healing, with a first level spell slot now that increases by 2d8 per spell slot level now. So it may be wise in the right situation to upcast this, unlike the 2014 version. Disguise Self is auto-prepared through Gloomstalker and can help Vax with sneaking, scouting, and subterfuge. Fog Cloud is just a strong spell that adds obscurement in the absence of darkness. Hunter's Mark we've already discussed, and finally, Long Strider adds additional movement on top of all the bumps the build already gets through Rogue, Gloomstalker, and Base Ranger. Bless unfortunately isn't available to Rangers, but Aid is. This can be a decent way to buff allies or even bring up multiple allies that have fallen to something like a Dragon's Breath weapon, a Vampire's Bite, or even a Lich's Meteor Swarm. Lesser Restoration parallels some of the restorative powers of Lay on Hands from Paladin, but with even more power as it can ease blinded, deafened, paralyzed, or poisoned. I'm taking this instead of the more powerful Spike Growth simply because Spike Growth is a spell befitting Keyleth, not Vax. It just doesn't work for him. But we will take the other extremely powerful level 2 Ranger spell that happens to fit Vax perfectly, and that's Pass Without a Trace. Yes, Vex has a spell, but oh well. It's too fitting. The Champion of the Raven Queen. A 30-foot emanation that adds a plus 10 to stealth is spot on. It also saves some of Vex's precious spell slots for different and more fitting magic. Vex's 64 castings of the spell could have been alleviated a bit with this addition to Vax's arsenal. And finally, an auto-prepared spell for Gloomstalkers and one of the most powerful level 2 spells in the game, Rope Trick. If you're new to optimization, you may be unaware of just how powerful the spell could be due to it creating an extra dimensional space that disallows attack spells and other effects from passing through. Casting this and hiding in the space while popping out to attack and then hide again under full protection of the spell simply ends many encounters right away. This may be too much cheese for some people, but it's there if you want it, or more importantly, need it. For the final 2 levels, we'll head back into Rogue for Improved Cunning Strike to use up to 2 Cunning Strike options per sneak attack, and at Rogue 12, an Epic Boon, and here there are an abundance of riches for Vax. With a couple of exceptions, nearly all the selections will work, but Boon of the Night Spirit seems to fit just a little bit better than the rest. We'll round off Dexterity, finally, and Merge with Shadows allows Vax to turn invisible in dim light along with darkness. More importantly, Shadowy Form gives resistance to all damage, excluding Psychic and Radiant, in that dim light or darkness. And that is Vax'ildan. Throwing builds were effectively terrible over the last decade, but in 2024 they are a completely viable build option as seen here. In fact, this build with no magic weapons can dish out over 76 DPR in round 1, 64 in subsequent rounds, or as high as 85 with the use of a Poisoner's Kit, assuming advantage from the invisibility condition or the Assassinate feature, or any other means. Add in the damage from some of the exceptional magic daggers Vax had, and those damage numbers creep up very quickly. Okay, thanks folks. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you here next time.